tells the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row.
Hello and welcome back. So we've spent the last couple episodes looking at the damage. We have seen and talked about how boys were sidelined and how the curriculum was stripped of its soul. But today we're going to stop looking at the what and start looking at the who. It's a very interesting topic, looking at the who, right? When a parent stands up at a school board meeting and asks why their child can't read, why are they met with a blank stare, or why are they met with a security guard, right? And if any of you have paid any attention to school board meetings lately, and even town board meetings, there are a lot of people that have spoke their mind. They have used their First Amendment to utilize free speech, and they have been met with security guards, and they have been kicked out of those meetings. So who is the invisible hand that makes sure that the bad teachers stay in the classroom while the innovators are pushed out? It is not your neighbor, the third grade teacher. It is the machine behind her. And today we're exposing the NEA, the National Education Association, and the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. And this is not a labor movement. This is a $600 million a year political cartel that has taken your children hostage to pay for its seat at the table of power. I'm D-Rec, and this is Breaking the System, the Union Racket. So to break a machine, you have to understand how it's fueled. And this machine runs on one thing: mandatory plunder. Quite interesting, isn't it? The NEA is the largest labor union in the United States. Yes, you heard that right. The NEA, the National Education Association, is the largest labor union in the United States, boasting nearly 3 million members. And in a typical year, the NEA headquarters, or the national headquarters alone, rakes in somewhere around $375 million just in dues. And the AFT, well, if we add the AFT to that, you're looking at a combined war chest that dwarfs almost every other lobbying entity in Washington, right? And so this kind of brings us to our closed loop mechanism. What's that look like? Well, in many states, dues are taken directly out of a teacher's paycheck before they even see it, so that's what they call automatic deductions. And while unions claim dues only go to representation, the accounting tells a different story, right? Follow the money. Okay? In the 2020 election cycle, the NEA and the AFT combined spent over $65 million on federal elections. And another statistic to add to that is that 98% of that money went to a single political party. Take a guess which political party that was. You're right. That's the one. Okay. This is the most cynical part. The union spends millions to elect the school board members. They essentially choose the people who are supposed to be management, quote unquote. So it's in essence what they call buying the boss. Okay? So think about that. Stop and think about that for a minute. Your tax dollars pay the teacher. The teacher then is forced to pay the union. Okay? The union pays the politician. The politician signs the contract that demands more of your tax dollars. You are the only person in this loop who has no voice, right? You as the parent, okay? The other person that doesn't really have a voice is the teacher itself. If they choose to stay in the union, and we can go down that road if we want. So like a question would be why? Why do teachers join a union? Well, what happens if a parent tries to go after a teacher for X, Y, or Z? Or what happens if a teacher is defamed or whatnot? There are a lot of teachers that can't afford to pay for all the high court costs. So that's where a union would come into play. A teacher's union would come into play. They would represent that person in court up to X amount of dollars. Okay, so that's what the union dues go towards, or that's what they're supposed to go towards. Okay, so the teacher doesn't really have a voice in what their dues go for or who their dues represent, and you as a parent don't have a voice in that loop that we just talked about at all whatsoever. So if the money loop is the fuel, protective tenure is the army. Or the armor, sorry. And we're told that tenure is about academic freedom. Well, that's a lie. In the K through 12 system, tenure is a lifetime employment guarantee that makes it nearly impossible, not impossible, but nearly impossible to fire what we would call an incompetent teacher. Okay? And so they call this like the dance of the lemons. Okay, so let's look at that. In major cities like Chicago or New York, the process to fire a single underperforming tenured teacher can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years. That's a long time. In addition to that, it would cost the taxpayer, right? Because the state, in essence, would have to take that teacher to court, in upwards of around $200,000 in legal fees. Okay? And so, like, who's going to pay for that? Well, it's going to be you and I, tax-paying citizens. Okay? So what does a principal do when they have a teacher who doesn't show up or they can't teach things like basic math? Well, supposedly they can't fire them. The union will bury the district in things called grievances. So they do the dance of the lemons. They trade their worst teacher to another school in exchange for that school's worst teacher. They just shuffle the rot around the system while the kids fall behind. And we have seen that all too far and familiar with places like public school education in like Chicago, where the majority of 8th graders are not performing at grade level in reading or in academics, right? And that's huge. That is huge. So this creates a culture of mediocrity. The young, energetic teacher who stays late to help your son, she's the first one laid off during the budget cuts because she lacks seniority. The union doesn't care how good she is. They only care how long she's been paying dues, right? And if she's just started, think about it. She's not paid very many dues, so they're going to let her go. Whereas the teacher that's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to keep that teacher around because that teacher is paid more in union dues. Okay. So what's the power play? Well, the CDC was ready to tell schools to open, and the union stepped in. Actually, let me take a step back here. Forgot a part. We go back to this, what I would call the smoking gun, COVID. Okay, and that's a dirty word for some people. It leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, but it really was like a learning curve for a lot of people, myself included. So the smoking gun here is COVID. So if you want to see the racket in its purest, most evil form, we want to look at 2020 and 2021. For decades, they told us it's all for the children, and then the pandemic hit. And we now have the receipts, which are emails obtained through FOIA requests, FOIA, FOIA, showing that the AFT and Randy Warginger were literally editing CDC internal documents. Okay, so this gets into where I was just talking about a while ago, where the CDC was ready to tell schools to open, but the union stepped in and said, nope, not yet. We're not ready. They used the closure of schools as a bargaining chip to demand billions in federal funding and political concessions. So what was the damage that was done here? Well, the NAEP, they like their acronyms. That stands for the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP. Scores saw the largest drop in math and reading in 30 years, right? And now we know that. We know why places like Chicago and New York, where kids can't read or write or can't do math at grade level, like not even close at grade level. Okay? So this brings us into the victimhood that we've talked about earlier. Low income, especially in boys who were already struggling, were left in these quote-unquote Zoom schools for 18 months while union leaders bragged about their political wins at conventions. Okay? And at some schools, like, it didn't even matter. Like, the kids weren't even required to do the work. They weren't even required to show up, right? We had Zoom meetings, we had Zoom calls, or whatever you want to call them, Google Meets or whatever. And nothing was mandatory. Nothing was held over accountability for that young generation. All because of the pandemic, all because of COVID, okay? And the union took advantage of that, 100%. They didn't care about the science. They didn't care about the mental health crisis or the suicide rates among isolated teens, all of which went up, right? Well, grades went down. Grades went down. Mental health crises went up. Suicide rates went up, especially in teens that were extremely isolated, or teens that were scared of X, Y, or Z, or didn't go out in public. They didn't get sunshine. They didn't get fresh air. They locked themselves in an isolated, artificial environment, right? Of course, suicide rates are going to go up. Okay, we're only finding out about this stuff now. So the unions, they cared about proving that they own the system, and boy did they. They proved they can turn the lights off in every school in America if you don't kiss the proverbial ring, so to speak. Okay? Let's jump forward to today. Well, actually yesterday. Okay? You would think that especially in Chicago, where these teacher unions, where the students are not performing at or even close to grade level, they would be focusing on that, right? But no. What are they focused on? Well, look at Fox News or any other news broadcast system. Just look up teacher unions in Venezuela, right? And what pops up? Okay. Here's your headline. Chicago Teachers Union promotes Venezuela regime change. Protests organized by socialist groups. Why is the teacher union why do they even remotely care what's going on or what's happening in Venezuela? It has nothing to do with our children. It has nothing to do with the school system. So why are you focused on it, right? We need to tell these people, shut the hell up, stay in your lane, focus on education, focus on getting these kids the education that they deserve, right? We don't give two shits what the teachers union cares or what they promote about Venezuela. We don't care. We want to see our kids getting a good education, right? Teachers union, stay in your lane, focus on schools, focus on education, right? That should come first and foremost, right? So that was a big beef that I had with, looking into the teachers union today, or yesterday actually. Okay. So the Union Racket is the firewall. It protects the bad curriculum. It protects the falling or the failing teacher, and it protects the politician who keeps the money flowing. 100%, right? In anything that we look at, when we put on our critical thinking cap and we follow the money, where is the money going? Who is paying who? What are they getting in return? Where's the money going? Right? That's critical thinking. Follow the money. So the real question becomes, how do we fight back? Well, since 2018, we have Janus versus AFSCME, Supreme Court ruling. Public employees are no longer required to pay union dues to keep their jobs. If you are a teacher listening to this, stop paying for your own muzzle. You have the right to opt out. You also have the right to opt in to other teacher unions. So if your teacher union at your facility is donating money to a political ideology that you don't agree with, right? You can opt out of that. You do not have to be forced to pay that, okay? That is a new court ruling, okay? Stop ignoring the bottom of the ballot. The union wins because they show up to vote for their hand-picked candidates. You need to show up and vote for people who answer to parents, right? Parents should come first, not the NEA, right? And I think there's a lot of people that that are not showing up, right? And I don't mean to call parents out, myself included, but when was the last time you went to a board meeting, right? When was the last time you sat in on the board talking about new curriculum that they were going to bring into the district, right? If you don't show up, they can do whatever they want. They can teach whatever they want, right? We can be bringing these sick, twisted, pedophilic books into the school system, which they have done, right? There has been some pushback. There definitely needs to be more pushback, in my opinion. But critically think about that. Why are they pushing those particular topics in our school? Who is pushing those particular topics in our schools? And at the end of the day, if we're not asking, is the NEA a part of this and why, then we're not critically thinking. Okay? And that's all I'm asking you to do. As a person that watches this show, at any point in time, are you critically thinking about the things that are affecting your life day in and day out? Or in this case, your children's lives, your children's education, and how they grow up, or how they're taught, or how they're indoctrinated, or whatever, right? Are you showing up for those things? And the only way to kill a monopoly is to introduce competition. 100%. Even in this case. So when the money follows the student, the union loses its hostage, right? And so what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about a system where if we dismantle the Department of Education, and they have seriously been talking about this, and the funding goes back to the states, or the decision kind of goes back to the states, then how is that not a good thing? Because now you have schools competing against other schools who are competing for students, right? Would you as a parent not choose, if it's the same price, to take your kid to a school of choosing that is more successful? So therein that money would follow the student, who would go to a school who is being competent in educating that person to a higher degree than another school. Okay? And I really want you to think about that. That is what dismantling the Department of Education does. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that all of that is good. I'm not saying that dismantling the Department of Education is 100% good, because there's going to be some drawbacks. Okay? But in any change, we have to outweigh, or we have to weigh, so to speak, the good versus the bad. Okay? And is the things that could potentially be good better than the things that could potentially be bad? And if that's the case, then we need to move forward with those things. And when we look at the Department of Education, and we look at the millions and billions of dollars that we have spent on the Department of Education, what good has it done? Ask yourself that. Are kids smarter today than what they were 40 years ago? No, they're not. At least the test scores don't say it. So why are we funneling billions of dollars through the Department of Education? Why are we funneling millions upon millions of dollars through these unions who only have themselves and the politicians that they back as best interest, and not the students, and not education? Okay? So we have to stop this monopoly, and we have to introduce competition. And that is the best way, when the money follows the student who goes to a school who is better than all the other schools around them. And that choice is left up to you, the parent. Where do you want to send your child? Okay? And so this system that we keep talking about, it is not broken. Once again, it is working exactly as the union, the teachers' union, intended. So it's time to stop trying to fix the machine and start trying to dismantle it. Okay? How are we going to do that? Well, we just talked about a few of those. Okay? We've got to start critically thinking about what is affecting us and what change we can have little by little, day by day in our own lives, because let's be honest, we're not going to change the big system overnight. As an individual, you're not. You're just not. And collectively, we're too divided on things like race and religion and gender, politically. All of these things are just dividing us so much that we're not going to carry a voice loud enough to dismantle the big system. Okay? It's just never going to happen. All right? So you have to ask yourself critically, what changes can you make day to day that benefits you and your family? And this is one of those, right? We should be demanding the best education in the world, right? The United States spends more per capita than any nation in the world on education. So why in the hell are we not number one? Why are we not in the top 5? Why are we not in the top 10? These are things that we should be asking ourselves, okay? And the answer in this case is the unions, okay? Is the teachers' unions. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all unions are bad. I'm just saying that we need to take a hard look at the union that we have, or the unions that we have, and are they operating in the best capacity? I would say no, but that's just my opinion. What's your opinion? Okay? And with that, that has been another episode of Breaking the System. Join us next time as we look at something else at the final frontier. Okay? Remember, think critically, be critically, have an open mind. Okay? We'll see you guys next time. Peace. Appreciate it.